Reading out from ICC Cell Study, Act wise summary of Julius Caesar. Act 3, Scene 1. A large number of people desiring to see Caesar have gathered in the street which leads to the Capitol. Among them are Artemidorus and the soothsayer. Caesar tauntingly tells the soothsayer, "The ideas of March are calm." To this, the soothsayer replies, "A Caesar, but not gone." Artemidorus goes forward and presents his letter to Julius Caesar, pressing him to read it at once as it concerns him. তাহলে কি presents him Artemidorus presents goes forward and presents his letter to Caesar, pressing him to read it at once as it concerns Caesar the most. But Caesar puts it aside to be considered later. Caesar goes into the Senate hall and occupies his seat. As planned, Trebonius draws Mark Antony away and the conspirators crowd around Caesar. Metellus Cimber presents a petition before Caesar that his brother Publius Cimber, who has been sent into banishment, should be called back. Brutus and Cassius support his plea, but Caesar dismisses the petition. Metellus Cimber pleads his case on his knees, but Caesar, firm as the pole star, refuses. The conspirator then move closer to Caesar. Suddenly, Casca draws a knife and stabs Caesar from behind on his neck. Others follow suit and stab Caesar. Brutus, last of all, stabs Caesar. The conspirators then move closer to Caesar. Suddenly, Casca draws a knife and stabs Caesar from behind. Others follow it and stab Caesar. Brutus, last of all, stabs Caesar. Unable to bear this blow from his best friend, Caesar falls down with feet to brute on his lips. Lips, lips. The senators are dumb with horror. The citizens cry out and run wildly. Brutus and Cassius try to control the situation but they fail. Trebonius comes and informs that Antony has fled to his house surprised. Brutus then invites his fellow conspirators to bathe their hands in Caesar's blood. They do this, and Cassius comments that their great act will be recorded in history and they have assured themselves of lasting fame. Next, one servant of Antony comes and informs Brutus that Antony asks to be assured of his safety. If he comes to the Senate house, he wants to know why Caesar deserved death. Brutus instructs the servant that no harm will be done to Antony and he will be satisfied. Mark Antony arrives and seeing the dead body of Caesar, he is stricken with grief. He asks the conspirators to kill him if they hate him. Brutus assures him that their action may seem to be bloody, but they are not murderers. They are motivated to do a little wrong for the sake of doing much more good. Pity for Rome forced them to swallow all pity for Caesar. Brutus adds that they have all praise and respect for Antony, and in the new government he will have an equal voice while distributing honors and positions. Once they have calmed the crowd, they will explain to him why they killed Caesar. Antony pretends to be satisfied and shakes hand with each of the conspirators. He waits for them to give convincing reasons for the death of Caesar. Then Antony requests Brutus that he should be allowed to address the people on the day of Caesar's funeral. Brutus agrees to this, but Cassius has some doubts. He draws Brutus aside and warns him. He fears that by Antony's speech, the mob may be stirred to sympathy for Caesar. It is then settled that Brutus will address the mob first and give reason why they murdered Caesar. Then Antony will address them. Moreover, he will speak only good of Caesar. He shall not say anything harmful against the conspirators. Antony agrees to pay homage to Caesar under these conditions. The conspirators then retire and he is left alone with the body of Caesar. Addressing the dead body of Caesar, Antony foretells that there will now be a civil strife until the conspirators are wiped out. Nah, conspirators are wiped out. Full stop. Caesar's spirit will roam about Rome asking for revenge. Roam about Rome mane ROAM Rome about ROME Rome asking for revenge. The servant of Octavius Caesar comes. He is shocked to see the dead body of Caesar. He informs Antony that his master Octavius has camped near Rome. Antony decides to send him back, instructing Octavius not to enter Rome at that moment. Then he delays the servant's departure for some time. Antony and that servant remove Caesar's dead body from here. Now, Act 3, Scene 2. This is the famous forum scene. Act 3, Scene 2. Famous forum scene. Followed by a crowd of angry people. আচ্ছা একটা ছোট্ট জিনিস বলে দিই Antony, I doubt not of your wisdom. Let each man render me his bloody hand. So, oh, he is shaking hands with all the conspirators. তো সেই নামগুলো পরপর বলি ফার্স্ট মার্কাস ব্রুটাস will I shake with you. Next, Caius Cassius, do I take your hand. Now, Decius Brutus, yours. Now, yours, Metellus, yours, Cinna, and my valiant Casca, yours, though last not least in love, yours, good Trebonius. এই সাতজনের সাথে সেভেন কনস্পিরেটর্স মার্কাস ব্রুটাস, কেইয়াস কেশিয়াস, ডেসিয়াস ব্রুটাস, মেটিলাস, সিন্না, কাস্কা, ট্রেবোনিয়াস. Antony shakes hand with these seven conspirators. To remember this, I have made a mnemonic. मैं बहुत क्रेडिट दूंगी मेट्सी कास्ट्रे को. मैं बहुत क्रेडिट दूंगी इमिटीमेट CIC CAS कास TRE ट्रे मेट्सी कास्ट्रे को. मेट्सी कास्ट्रे is a name. मैं एम बहुत बी मार्कस ब्रूटस क्रेडिट दूंगी केयास केशियस ना हाँ केयास केशियस दूंगी डिशियस ब्रूटस मेटिलस मेट सिन्ना CI मेट सी कास कास्का कास ट्रे ट्रेबोनियस को. मैं बहुत मार्कस ब्रूटस क्रेडिट दूंगी केयस केशियस एंड डिशियस ब्रूटस মেটসি কাস্ট্রেকো মানে মেটিলাস সিমনা কাস্কা ট্রেবনিয়াস। তো অ্যান্টনি shake hands with the seven conspirators. Now let us come back to Act 3, Scene 2. This is the famous forum scene, followed by a crowd of angry people. Brutus and Cassius enter the forum. The people want to hear the reason for Caesar's murder. As directed, some of them follow Cassius to hear his explanation, while others surround Brutus. Brutus goes up into a pulpit and addresses them. Brutus tells the throng, জানি না মানে, that he loved and respected Caesar for his bravery, but he killed him because he loves Rome even more. Caesar was killed because he was very ambitious. If he had lived, he would have made slaves of them. He asks, Mane, this is Act 3, Scene 2, is the place where Brutus speaks. Maybe Antony will speak after this. So, this forum scene, Act 3, Scene 2, both the people will speak one after the other. One first Brutus will speak, then Antony. Let's see what happens. Brutus tells the throng that he loved and respected Caesar for his bravery, but he killed him because he loves Rome even more. Caesar was killed because he was very ambitious. If he had lived, he would have made slaves of them all. He asks if anyone is there who does not love Rome or who will love to become a slave. As expected, the answer is in the negative. At this stage, Antony and others enter with Caesar's dead body. Brutus then urges the crowd to listen to Antony's funeral speech. The people agree to do this, and Brutus departs. The people are not yet fully convinced that Caesar's death was justified. Some of them wish to bring Brutus home with all respect. Bring Brutus home. এটা নিয়ে প্রশ্ন আছে। When Brutus has gone, Antony goes up into the pulpit. People expect that he should not speak even a word against Brutus. Antony declares that he has come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. Caesar, he says, was his close friend, but he too had certain faults. As Brutus has pointed out, he was very ambitious. It must be true because Brutus is an honorable man. He adds that when the poor cried, Caesar used to weep. An ambitious person hardly ever does this. To prove what he has said, Antony gives an example. At the feast of Lupercalia, Caesar was offered the crown thrice by Antony, but he refused to accept it. It certainly does not seem like ambition. He adds that he doesn't want to disapprove what noble Brutus has said, but he is resolved to speak the truth. তাহলে Antony declares that he has come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. Caesar, he says, was his close friend, but he too had certain faults. As Brutus has pointed out, he was very ambitious. It must be true because Brutus is an honorable man. He adds that when the poor cried, Caesar used to weep. And ambitious person hardly ever does this. Next point, he says that to prove what he said, Antony gives an example. At the feast of Lupercal festival, Lupercalia, Caesar was offered the crown thrice by Antony, but he refused to accept it. He adds that he doesn't want to disprove what noble Brutus has said, but he is resolved to speak the truth. Antony then breaks off as if acutely grief stricken. The citizens begin to discuss that there is some truth in what Antony says. Some of them remark that he is so much affected that his eyes are red with weeping. And they feel perhaps Brutus was wrong. Caesar was not so very ambitious as stated by Brutus. After a brief pause, Antony begins to address the mob again. He states that he has no intention of doing any wrong to Brutus and his fellow senators, as they are all honorable men. Very cleverly strikes a contrast between Caesar's former greatness and his present weakness. It is a big tragic fall that even a stone-hearted person will feel pity for him. How much pitiable would it be if the murder were undeserved? Antony stresses that it is true. He can prove that the murder is undeserved, but he will prefer not to say anything on this against Brutus and others because they are all honorable men. Very tactfully, Antony says that he has found Caesar's bill, but he will not read it. He adds that if he read it, they would feel that Caesar was their best friend and well wisher. And the people now cry out for the will to be read, but Antony refuses to accept their demand. He says that there will be mutiny and bloodshed once the people come to know what Caesar had left for them now has left for them. Now there is much more insistence on the part of the mob to read the will. Instead of reading the will, Antony steps down from the stage. He stands near the dead body of Caesar, thinking hard. The people crowd in a circle around him, and the body of Caesar. Referring to Caesar's mantle, he recalls proud memories of Caesar's victory over Narvi. He laments that the same mantle was pierced by the daggers of Cassius, Casca, Brutus, and others. Then Antony withdraws the mantle and shows the mutilated body of Caesar. Unable to bear this sight, some people begin to cry with anger and bitterness. They denounce Brutus and others as treacherous villains who have mercilessly murdered their great king Caesar. Mercilessly murdered Caesar. Antony pretends to be utterly surprised. He tells the listeners that he does not intend to stir up trouble. He says that he is no orator like Brutus, but a plain man. He has no wish to wrong those respectable persons who have become murderers. Antony says that if he were an orator like Brutus, he could put a tongue in each of Caesar's wounds. Even the stone would rise in revolt. The crowd now fully aroused. They cry for revenge. Now Antony plays the last card. He shows the wheel of Caesar, which bears his seal. He reads out that Caesar has left 75 drachmas to each citizen of Rome. He has also left his private works and gardens for the use of the public. Now the crowd goes out of control. In mad excitement, they rush off to burn down the houses of conspirators. Antony, satisfied that his words have had the desired effect, the mischief is on the rampage. A servant of Octavius Caesar comes to inform Antony that his master has come to Rome. He has gone to Caesar's house. Antony is happy to receive this message. He goes off to join him. The servant tells Antony that Brutus and Cassius are read like madmen through the gates of Rome. RID, read like madmen through the gates of Rome. Act 3, Scene 3. In this scene, Cinna the poet talks about his dream in which he was feasting with Caesar. This dream brings fears in his mind and he treats it as something ominous. He feels driven out of his house despite his unwillingness. তাহলে ফার্স্ট তিনটায় কি হলো? অ্যাক্ট থ্রি সিন ওয়ানে ট্রেবোনিয়াস Artemidorus tries to present a petition in front of Caesar, and Caesar refuses to see the petition, and Caesar is being murdered. In the second scene, what happens? Both Brutus and Antony deliver their speech, and Antony becomes successful in infuriating the mob. In Act 3, Scene 3, what happens? Cinna the poet um, is murdered by the mad mob. How? Let's see. The unfortunate murder of Cinna the poet takes place in Act 3, Scene 3. In this scene, Cinna the poet talks about his dream in which he was feasting with Caesar. This dream brings fears in his mind and he treats it as something ominous. He feels driven out of his house despite his unwillingness to go out due to the fear gathered by the due to the fear that he has gathered by the dream, the ominous dream. While he is thinking of all those things aloud, a citizen comes and asks his name. Then the others join and ask him other things about his family. Ask him about his family, his name, and then they ask him whether he was a bachelor or single. The citizens are already excited and angry due to Caesar's murder and Antony's emotional speech on the funeral. They ask him where he was going. As he tells them that he was going to Caesar's funeral, the first citizens one wants to know whether he was going there as a friend or as an enemy. He says that he is going there as a friend. The moment the citizens come to know that the name of the person is Cinna, they consider him one of the conspirators named Cinna who had killed Caesar. Although he keeps pleading that he was not the conspirator Cinna, the citizens get ready to kill him. He keeps on saying that he is the poet Cinna, not the conspirator Cinna, but the agitated citizens kill him. This shows how the mob fury works recklessly. This shows how the mob fury works recklessly. The scene ends with the citizens inciting one another to let loose the violence and burn the houses of the conspirators who had killed Caesar. Now coming to Act 4, Scene 1. So, first scene, giving the petition by Artemidorus and the murder of Caesar. Act 3, Scene 2, both Brutus and Antony delivered the speech, and Antony wins over by instigating the crowd against the conspirators. Act 3, Scene 3, Cinna the poet is murdered by the mob, by the angry mob. Act 4, Scene 1. This scene takes place in Mark Antony's room after some time spanning to a few months later Caesar's murder. Antony, Octavius, and Lepidus are together as they now form a triumvirate. So the triumvirate is of Antony, Octavius, Lepidus. So the triumvirate is of Octavius, Antony, Lepidus, OLA, Ola. And together as they now form a triumvirate which governs Rome. As Brutus and Cassius have already fled Rome, the second triumvirate replaces them. And as Brutus and Cassius have already fled Rome, the second triumvirate replaces them. Here, triumvirate implies the joint role, and in this case, consisting of three members, namely Antony, Octavius, and Lepidus. Ola. Octavius, Lepidus, Antony. OLA. Ola. They sit around a table taking about their enemies, whom the three decide to kill. Arcasius's friend ke TF মানে Trebonius friend, আর PF PS মানে পুলিশ স্টেশন, TF ট্রেবোনিয়াস ফ্রেন্ড, আর PS মানে পুলিশ স্টেশন বলি না আমরা, PS পিন্ডেরাস হচ্ছে সার্ভেন্ট। তাহলে ট্রেবোনিয়াস ইজ দ্য ফ্রেন্ড অফ কেশিয়াস, পিন্ডেরাস ইজ দ্য সার্ভেন্ট অফ কেশিয়াস। যাই হোক, আর এই ওলা হচ্ছে ট্রায়ামভিরেট। This Jayok, the here triumvirate implies the joint rule, and in this case consisting of three members, namely Octavius, Lepidus, and Antony. They sit around a table talking about their enemies, whom the three decide to kill. The list of their enemies has the names of Antony's nephews and Lepidus's brother also. They send Lepidus to Caesar's house to bring his wheel. তাহলে they plan to cut down the money set aside in the will by Antony for certain payments. The moment Lepidus leaves, Antony's true attitude and thoughts about him come out. He talks about Lepidus in highly derogatory terms, calling him unmeritable man who is meant to be used as a tool to gain power. Octavius tries to show his disagreement and counters his views, saying that Lepidus was a brave and experienced soldier. Antony then retorts that his war horse too has these qualities. He asserts that they must throw Lepidus out of the triumvirate as he no longer remains useful and his utility for them is over. So, in Act 4, Scene 1, we can find out that how Mark Antony has disrespect for Lepidus, his dislike for Lepidus, and how he is ready to throw Lepidus out of the team after he has used him completely. After a few moments, Antony shifts the discussion to the matter at hand. It relates to their concern that their enemies Brutus and Cassius are engaged in raising huge army, but the resources of their own, the new triumvirate, are limited. In face of danger from the armies of Brutus, Cassius, Brutus and Cassius, Antony and Octavius also decide to join hands and combine their forces to defeat them. Next, Act 4, Scene 3. The scene is set in Brutus's camp. So, first scene, petition given by Artemidorus and the murder of Caesar. Second scene, Act 3, Scene 2, Brutus's speech and Mark Antony's speech, and finally, mob's fury. Third scene, Act 3, Scene 3, Cinna the poet is murdered. Act 4, Scene 1, we find Antony, Mark Antony, and Octavius engaged in a conversation. We come to know about the triumvirate Ola. At the same time, we find Mark Antony talking negative about Lepidus, and he is not willing to keep Lepidus in their team. In Act 4, Scene 2, we have come to Sardis. The scene is set in Brutus's camp near Sardis in Asia Minor. Sardis is in Asia Minor, the ancient capital of Lydia. Lydia. The happenings in this scene take place a few more months after the earlier scene. Brutus enters accompanied by Lucilius, Titinius, and some soldiers. At that time, Pinderus, Cassius's attendant, is seen meeting Lucius at some distance. On seeing Pinderus, Brutus expresses surprise and asks if Cassius was also somewhere near. Pinderus gives a letter from Cassius to Brutus. On reading the letter, Brutus tells Pindarus that his master Cassius has written good things for him, but he also has certain things in mind that give him reason to think that Cassius should not have done certain things that he had done. And Brutus confirms that the friendship between him and Cassius has not remained as warm as it used to be earlier. Their conversation is disturbed with the hustle and bustle created by someone's arrival. The sounds of stage signify the arrival of Cassius and his cavalry units. Cassius immediately moves towards Brutus, complaining that his behavior towards Cassius has been unfair. Brutus at first denies this emphatically as he is taken aback due to this sudden and unexpected outburst of Cassius. Brutus asks Cassius to keep his calm in front of the soldiers and wants him to accompany to the privacy of his tent. Brutus tells Cassius to talk about this matter there in the tent only, where he will be free to express his grievances in detail. Cassius agrees and they do go inside the tent while Lucilius and Titinius are left to guard the entrance so that Brutus and Cassius are not disturbed. So, in this scene, we have come to Brutus's camp near Sardis. Here, we find in Act 4, Scene 2, we find that Brutus and Cassius are engaged in a conversation, heated conversation, and their relation has already started deteriorating. Next, Act 4, Scene 3. The conversation that Brutus had suggested to be carried on inside the camp take place. No, in the earlier scene, conversation doesn't take place. Pindarus attendant is seen meeting Lucilius at some distance. Pindarus Brutus. Acha, on seeing Pindarus, Brutus expresses surprise and asks Cassius was also somewhere near. This kind of things happens in this Act 4, Scene 2. Nothing significant happens. In Act 4, Scene 3, the historical conversation between Brutus and Cassius takes place. The conversation that Brutus has suggested to be carried on inside the camp takes place. Brutus and Cassius are alone here. এটা কিন্তু Act 4, Scene 2 টা একবার কিন্তু দেখে নেওয়া উচিত অন্য জায়গা থেকে যে কি আছে। খুব ডেফিনিট কিছু বোঝা গেল না। Act 4, Scene 3 তে তো কনভারসেশনটা আছে। The conversation that Brutus has suggested to be carried on inside the camp takes place. Brutus and Cassius are alone here. Cassius tells Brutus about the cause of his annoyance with him. He complains that Brutus punished Lucius Pella, a follower of Cassius, for taking bribes despite Cassius's pleas for leniency. Brutus now expresses his doubt that Cassius too had an itching palm and took bribes. Brutus accuses Cassius of selling official positions to unworthy and undeserving men. Cassius is furious over this. He proclaims that his blame was so serious that he could have Brutus for this, killed Brutus for this if he had not been an old friend. Brutus then reminds Cassius that they had killed Caesar, the foremost man of this world, for the sake of justice only. It was now not desired that they too should start indulging in corruption and start taking bribes. Brutus tells Cassius that he was frightened of his anger as he is an honest man. Then he complains that he had requested Cassius to send some money in gold, but he did not receive that. He is so honest that he would prefer to turn his own heart into gold instead of extracting money from poor peasants through unfair means. Cassius's act of not sending the money was not good for him. Brutus would have preferred the wrath of God to sending a refusal for money to his friend as Cassius had done. Cassius denies all these charges, saying that the messenger sent for money had misunderstood his reply. Cassius says that a friend is supposed to downplay the faults of his friend. A friend is supposed to ডাউন প্লে কথাটার মানে দেখতে হবে, downplay the faults of his friend, but Brutus is a friend who was friend was Brutus as a friend was exaggerating his friend's mistakes. Cassius then plays an emotional card to pacify Brutus. He says that being a friend, he should not have noticed his faults. Then he says that his enemies, Antony and Octavius, should make only him the target of their vengeance. He expresses his pain that he is being hated by Brutus, the friend whom he loves the most. Cassius then offers his chest to Brutus and asks him to use his dagger and kill his friend Cassius. Here he points out that Brutus loved Caesar more than he loved Cassius. Thou lovest him better than ever thou lovest Cassius. At this point, Brutus pacifies Cassius, telling him that he was free to be angry with Brutus whenever he liked, and he would take these outbursts as a result of his whims and moody behavior. The quarrel ends, they shake hands. Cassius too admits that he loses temper soon, and Brutus also accepts being ill tempered. At this time, a poet comes and warns the two leaders, Brutus and Cassius, that they must not quarrel. Cassius expresses his amusement over the over this interruption and laughs. Brutus asks the guards to send that poet away. He does not like such an intrusion and interruption at the time when a serious matter like war is being discussed. The moment they are alone after departure of the poet, Brutus breaks the news of Portia's death to him. Cassius expresses deep sorrow over this. Brutus then explains how Portia had died. She was unable to bear the long absence of her husband. She became more worried and disappointed on learning that Antony and Octavius had grown quite strong. Consequently, she committed suicide by swallowing burning coals. Lucilius brings bowls of wine, and two leaders, Brutus and Cassius, drink a toast, and celebrate their reconciliation. Lucilius, Titinius, and Messala also joins them. Instead of mourning the death of Portia or feeling dejected, Cassius and Brutus look normal. Only Cassius does try to express his sorrow for dead Portia. Mm, but Brutus says, speak no more for her. Give me a bowl of wine. Brutus rather shows more interest in the letters, providing information about their enemies. Octavius and Antony, they come to know are Octavius and Antony, they come to know are advancing with a mighty power towards Philippi. They come to know that the triumvirates have already killed 70 of the senators, including Cicero. এরকম 70 জন সেনেটরকে মেরেছে, হান্ড্রেডস অফ সেনেটার্স তো আমি পড়েছিলাম, কি জানি বাবা, সিসেরেকে তো মেরেইছে. Mesala also talks about the reports received about Portia's death. Brutus receives the news showing no emotions and in a strong and bold manner. It surprises Messala, who is not aware that Brutus already knows this. Messala appreciates Brutus for taking the news calmly, saying, even so great losses should endure. Cassius expresses his inability to behave like this. I have so much of this in art as you, but yet my nature could not bear it so. Mane Brutus abruptly changes the topic to their preparation for war and wants to know about Cassius's opinion about marching to Philippi. তার মানে অ্যাক্ট 4 সিন 3 is a very important scene. In this scene only we find the conversation, the heated conversation, the historical conversation between Brutus and uh, Cassius taking place. In the same scene, we come to know about Portia's death. In the same scene, Messala comes and informs that mm, Portia is dead. In the same scene, we come to know that Cicero, along with hundreds of senators, have been killed. এখানে 70 বলেছে, অন্য জায়গায় hundreds দেখেছি, এটা চেক করতে হবে। In the same scene, Brutus and Cassius decide whether they would march to Philippi towards Octavius and Octavius and Mark Antony's uh, enemy force, or they would remain in Sardis and wait for the enemy forces to come. So, Act 4, Scene 3 is a very important scene. Even so, men great losses should endure. Now, Cassius expresses his inability. যাই হোক, Brutus abruptly changes the topic to their preparation for war and wants to know about Cassius's opinion about marching towards Philippi. Cassius shows his unwillingness, saying that by marching towards the enemy, they'll exhaust their resources and strength. But Brutus argues that the forces of Antony and Octavius will get stronger if they do not take any action now, and the time is ripe. Brutus expresses his fear that the local people between Sardis and Philippi do not have goodwill for Brutus and Cassius. They may join Antony's forces. ওইখানে ছিল ফিলিপি আর কি, এখানে আছে সার্ডিস আর ফিলিপি, এটাই ঠিক বলে আমি মনে করি। Do not have the goodwill for Brutus and Cassius, they'll join Antony's forces. Philippi, therefore, it is important for them to go towards Philippi before these people strengthen their enemy forces. Cassius agrees with Brutus reluctantly and they decide to go towards Philippi. The next morning, Brutus calls Lucius and asks him to bring down his nightgown, and then all of them leave except Brutus. Lucius comes back with the gown. Brutus instructs the two of his trusted soldiers, Varro and Claudius, to sleep on cushions. দুটো ট্রাস্টেড সোলজারকে ছিল ভ্যারো আর ক্লডিয়াস টু স্লিপ অন কুশনস at the entrance of the tent and asks Lucius to play a musical instrument and sing a song. Lucius falls asleep while singing and Brutus takes away the instrument gently without disturbing the servants' sleep. When Brutus is awake alone and starts reading a book, Caesar's ghost appears. Brutus is frightened and feels perhaps something is wrong with his eyes only. He asks the ghost to reveal his identity. Brutus gets the answer from the ghost that Brutus was mm, seeing only his own evil spirit, and he will meet the ghost again in Philippi. The ghost disappears. Brutus feels less afraid now and awakens Lucius and two of his soldiers. They all deny having cried out in their sleep. They also affirm that they had not seen anything strange there. Brutus feels reassured and confident. He sends the soldiers to Cassius to deliver his message. The soldiers are instructed to convey Brutus's greetings to Cassius and asks him to advance to Philippi with his forces. Brutus is to follow him soon. So Act 4 Scene 3 is probably the most important scene, the biggest scene probably, and many things have taken place in this scene. Now we are moving on to Act 4 5 Scene 1. Cassius and Brutus have reached the Act 4, Scene 1. Cassius and Brutus have reached the plains of Philippi with their army. Octavius and Antony are already waiting for them along with their forces. Octavius feels pleased that they have got the opportunity to face and defeat the conspirators. Antony is of the view that their opponents were not there for an immediate encounter. They were simply making a show of their strength to disturb and dishearten them. At that time, a messenger comes there and informs that the enemy had come prepared and actually started the battle. In this situation, Antony and Octavius argue about the side each of them should cover with their soldiers. Before they could make a final decision, Cassius and Brutus come there and have an exchange of harsh words against one another. In this war of words, Antony talks to the conspirators and condemns them for their treachery against Caesar. Cassius here complains to Brutus that he had agreed to follow his advice. Antony would have been killed when they murdered Caesar. Cassius disparages Octavius by calling him a timid and weak boy. On his part, Octavius expresses his frustration with this exchange of words and challenges his opponents to come along with their force to have a decisive fight. He and his companion Antony go away to join their armies and prepare for the battle. Cassius says that they have staked everything on this war, which is likely to take place very soon. He also expresses his concern that the outcome of this storm is yet unknown to them. Brutus engages in conversation with Lucilius. Cassius talks to Messala. He tells Misala that it was his birthday and he was unwilling to risk everything on a battle. Cassius then admits how he has changed from being an Epicurean to someone who has started believing in superstitions and ill omens. So, all these things happen in Act 5, Scene 1. Omens. He then explains that two great eagles had flown over them when they set off from Sardis. But these eagles flew away the day he was talking about them. The place of these eagles had been taken by ravens, crows, and kites. It seems to foretell defeat and death. When Brutus comes and talks to Cassius, he wants to know Brutus's intentions and plans in the case of their defeat in the battle. Plans or he wants to know Brutus's intentions দরকার নেই. Brutus does not answer the questions in clear terms and emphasizes that instead of committing suicide or doing something out of frustration, it is better to face the situation with courage and fortitude. কি বললো? It seems to foretell defeat and death. When Brutus comes and talks to Cassius, he wants to know Brutus's intentions. Brutus does not answer the question in clear terms. Mane, Cassius wants to know from Brutus that if they lose, what Brutus will do. At that time, Brutus says that Brutus does not answer the question in clear terms and emphasizes that instead of committing suicide or doing something out of frustration, it is better to face the situation with courage and fortitude. But at the same time, he expresses his view that he would never like to be captured and held as a prisoner of war. However, he feels certain that on that day, the things had begun on the Ides of March. The murder of Caesar would come to an end. Both Cassius and Brutus go away to their respective forces. Before leaving, they cheerfully bid farewell to each other. Brutus says that they may not know the outcome of the war at this stage, but the day will finally reveal the outcome when it ends. Act 4, Scene 2. There is movement of soldiers in the battlefield. Brutus and Messala are there. Brutus tells Messala to ride a horse and take his written orders to the soldiers of different divisions. He expresses his view that Octavius's division is showing half-hearted interest in war and appears to be weak. Therefore, a little more effort can ensure their defeat. He again asks Messala to call all the forces for the attack. তাহলে অ্যাক্ট 5 সিন 2, it is a very very small scene. There is movement of soldiers in the battlefield in this scene. Brutus and Messala are there. Brutus tells Messala to ride a horse and take his written orders to the soldiers of different division. মানে rider Brutus tells Messala to ride a horse and take his written orders to the soldiers of different division. মনেও পড়ছে না অ্যাক্ট 5 সিন 2 তে এরকম কিছু হয়েছিল। He expresses his view that Octavius's division is showing half-hearted interest in war and appears to be weak. Therefore, a little more effort can ensure their defeat. He again asks Mesala to call all forces for the attack. This is a very small but very significant scene. This scene reveals Brutus's hassle in making judgment about the enemy forces. He declares the war and believes that Octavius is weak as a fighter. At this stage, the impression is generated that there is a chance for Brutus's victory. This scene serves as a useful dramatic purpose in rousing the expectations of the audience. Like other Shakespearean tragedies, the situational uncertainty gets highlighted here with the indications that there are chances of Brutus winning the war. Next, Act 5, Scene 2. In one part of the battlefield, Cassius is seen addressing Titinius in a worried and shocked way. He points out how his soldiers have deserted him. He has killed one of those soldiers running away from field. সেই যে বললো না ইনসাইন নিয়ে পালাচ্ছিল আমি মেরে দিয়েছি সেইটা। Titinius এটা Act 5 Scene 3 তে হলো। Titinius then explains that Brutus gave the orders for the attack too soon as he had some advantages over Octavius and wanted to make the most of it. His soldiers got involved in robbing and plundering the people instead of supporting Cassius's armies. Now Cassius and Titinius have been surrounded by Antony's forces. At this time, Pindarus enters and informs them that Antony had attacked their tent and they should run away to save their lives. Cassius asks Titinius to get up the hill, সেই হিলের উপর উঠে দেখা Act 5 Scene 3 তে get up the hill and see if his tents had been put on fire. Titinius says that the tents have been burnt. Cassius ও এটা আবার সেই টেন্ট নিয়ে দেখতে বলেছে। At that time, Pindarus enters and informs them that Antony had attacked their tent and they should run away to save their lives. Cassius asks Titinius to get up the hill and see if his tents had been put on fire. Titinius says that the tents have been burnt. Cassius wants Titinius to go and confirm if this has really happened to so. When Titinius leaves on his horse, Cassius asks Pindarus to go on the hill and see what Titinius আবার টাইটেনিয়াসকে পাঠিয়েছে সত্যি কি হয়েছে দেখার জন্য দিয়ে পাঠিয়ে দিয়ে আবার পিন্ডেরাসকে বলছে যাও। প্রথমবার টাইটেনিয়াসকে বলল হিলে উঠে দেখতে, টাইটেনিয়াস জানালো সব টেন্ট পুড়ে গেছে, দিয়ে টাইটেনিয়াসকেই পাঠিয়ে দিল হর্সে করে গিয়ে হোয়াট হ্যাড হ্যাপেন টু সি। দিয়ে আবার এবার কেশিয়াস পিন্ডেরাসকে হিলে চড়ালো, দিয়ে দেখলো ও দেখতে বললো টাইটেনিয়াসকে করছে, হোয়াট টাইটেনিয়াস ডাজ অ্যান্ড হোয়াট ইজ হ্যাপেনিং দেয়ার ইন দ্য ব্যাটল ফিল্ড। কে আচ্ছা কেশিয়াস টাইটেনিয়াস সেজ দ্যাট দ্য টেন্টস হ্যাভ বিন বার্নড। এটা খুব ইন্টারেস্টিং অ্যাক্ট 5 সিন 3 এটা দেখতে হবে যে সত্যি সত্যি টাইটেনিয়াস প্রথম গেল দিয়ে কি হলো। কেশিয়াস ওয়ান্টস টাইটেনিয়াস টু গো অ্যান্ড কনফার্ম if this has really happened. So when Titinius leaves on his horse, Cassius asks Pindarus to go on the hill and see what Titinius does and what is happening there in the battlefield. Pindarus goes up the hill, and Cassius, left alone for some time, says to himself that it was his birthday and perhaps his life has taken full circle, and the same day he met his death. Pindarus informs Cassius that he has noticed that Titinius had been surrounded by the enemy soldiers. He had been taken into custody as a prisoner of war. This news disappoints and frustrates Cassius. He tells Pindarus how he had taken Pindarus a prisoner in Parthia, saved his life, and ordained on him that he would always follow his always follow Cassius's orders. He then orders Pindarus to stab and kill him with the same sword that he had used to stab and murder Caesar. Pindarus obeys the orders and Cassius gets killed. After his death, Pindarus runs away so that he is not seen by any Roman. After his departure, Messala and Titinius come there. Titinius and Messala finds Cassius lying dead. Titinius remarks the son of Rome is said. টাইটিনিয়াস বন্ধু ছিল ফ্রেন্ড টিএফ টাইটিনিয়াস ফ্রেন্ড অফ কেশিয়াস ও বলল the son of Rome is said. Misala then explains that Cassius was killed because of his melancholic and desperate thoughts. Titinius then wants to know about Pindarus. Misala leaves Titinius there to search for Pindarus and goes out to break this sad and painful news to Brutus. In Messala's absence, Titinius talks aloud to himself as if addressing Cassius. His words reveal that he has gone and met Brutus and Cassius, his friend, on the other side of the field, where Brutus had taken advantage over Cassius. They had even given the wreath of victory to Titinius, but Cassius had misunderstood the situation as Pindorus could not understand that shouts of victory and joy he had heard were of Brutus's friends, and it was not because of Titinius taken in custody by the enemies, as thought and reported by Pindorus. Expressing his affection and sincerity for Cassius, Titinius also commits suicide. After Titinius's death, Messala enters, accompanied by Brutus and other companions. On learning that Cassius and Titinius had been slain, Brutus expresses his thoughts that it was due to the powerful presence of Caesar's spirit. It was Caesar's ghost, Brutus believes, who was turning the swords of Brutus's men towards themselves and causing their deaths by suicide. Brutus then mourns the death of Cassius and Titinius and calls them the last of all the Romans. He believes that no other Romans ever can ever parallel these two. He then advises not to hold Cassius's funeral in his camp as it has been have a disheartening impact on his forces. He gets ready to take the risk in second battle. তাহলে টাইটিনিয়াস বলল দ্য সান অফ রোম ইজ সেট কেশিয়াস সম্পর্কে ব্রুটাস টাইটিনিয়াস আর কেশিয়াস সম্পর্কে কি বললো দ্য লাস্ট অফ অল দ্য রোমান্স এইবার অ্যাক্ট 5 সিন 4 The soldiers of both the armies are seen fighting. They come to blows. Cato and Brutus shout aloud their names and claim to be brave fighters. They disappear. Cato gets killed in the battle. Oh, Cato এখানে ছিল. Cato and Brutus shout aloud their names and claim to be brave fighters. They disappear. Cato gets killed in the battle. Lucilius mourns the death of Cato who died fighting. A soldier comes and asks Lucilius to surrender. Lucilius, posing to be Brutus, tells that মানে এদিকে কেটো মরে গেল লুসিলিয়াস ওটা নিয়ে মন করলো তারপরে একটা সোলজার এলো এবং আস্কস লুসিলিয়াস টু সারেন্ডার লুসিলিয়াস ভান করলো he tried to camouflage his own identity and he behaved as if he was Brutus. He was trying to pose to be Brutus. Lucilius, posing to be Brutus, tells the soldier to kill Brutus and win honor in doing so. In this conclusion, Brutus escapes and Lucilius is taken prisoner. Antony's soldiers think that they have captured Brutus. Antony arrives and Lucilius proudly declares that Brutus will not let them imprison him. Antony asks the soldiers to treat Lucilius with kindness and honor. He expresses his desire to keep such men as friends rather than enemies. মানে he acknowledges the trustworthiness, the sacrifice, the goodness of Lucius, that by posing himself to be Brutus, he wanted to die at the hands of the enemy soldiers just to save the life of Brutus. He expresses his desire to keep such men as friends rather than enemies. Antony orders his soldiers to get Brutus dead or alive and bring the information to Octavius's camp. Act 5, Scene 5, the concluding scene. On the other side of the battlefield, Brutus is seen with his companions Dardanius, Clytus, Strato, and Volumnius. These are the people left with Brutus after the death of Cassius, Titanius, and Cato. Brutus calls them poor remains of friends. Brutus is all so desperate that he asks Clytus and Dardanius to kill him. Both of them refuse. Brutus then confides to Volumnius that Caesar's ghost appeared to him earlier in Sardis and now in Philippi. It has made him believe that the time of his death had approached. Brutus reminds Volumnius that they had been friends since their school days. He asks Volumnius that in the name of their old friendship, Volumnius should hold his sword and let Brutus run upon it. Volumnius does not agree. The intense sounds of the victory drums of Antony and Octavius's armies are heard. Brutus tells his friends that none of the followers had ever been disloyal to him. He takes pride in this. He claims that he has won more fame in his defeat than the honor that Antony will receive from his victory. Brutus considers Antony's victory shameful. Brutus remains there and promises to join his friends later as they flee from the enemies marching towards them. One of Brutus's companions, named Strato, does not know anything about his earlier attempts to commit suicide with the help of Clytus and Dardanius. He has been asleep. Strato gets up and Brutus induces him to hold the sword so that he may run upon it and commit suicide. Strato asks Brutus to give his hand to him and bids him farewell. So Strato is the final person who kills, Mane, who uh, helps Brutus die, Mane, uh, who who holds the sword and Brutus runs on it. Brutus too responds with a farewell greeting and runs on Strato's sword. As he dies, he says that now Caesar's spirit would rest in peace and Caesar had been avenged in Brutus's death. Strato explains to the retreating Octavius, Antony, Messala, and Lucilius about the manner in which Brutus had died. The army retreats, and Octavius accepts Strato as one of his followers. Um, Antony speaks about Brutus eulogizing. Eulogizing. He calls Brutus the noblest of all the conspirators, and as he was the only one who did not kill Caesar out of jealousy. In killing Caesar, Brutus was inspired by the thought of bringing general good to Rome and its people. Antony considers Brutus as a noble and honorable man. In his speech, Octavius is not an appreciative of Brutus as Antony's. He orders for Brutus's body to be carried to his tent. Arrangements are made to offer military honor to Brutus on his funeral. Octavius and Antony go away to decide the names of their men who deserved special awards and honors for their role in great victory that Antony and Octavius had achieved. এবার ফার্স্ট Act 3, Scene 1 এর critical appreciation. This scene is filled with suspense and tension. Ignoring the warning of the soothsayer and the letter of Artemidorus, Caesar enters the Senate hall. As planned, Trebonius draws Antony aside. The conspirators surround Caesar and treacherously murder him. Caesar may have been autocratic and arrogant, but the action of the conspirators can't be justified. Moreover, they stabbed him in the back. They will certainly be having some hidden motives. Caesar does behave arrogantly. He insults Metellus Cimber when he puts forth his petition. Caesar rejects it outrightly without giving any reason except that his brother has been banished by a decree. It throws light on one unpleasant side of Caesar's character. Although just, Caesar is very proud. Although just, Caesar is very proud, and for this arrogance, he pays a very heavy price. Although just, Caesar is very proud, and for his arrogance he pays a very heavy price. Brutus, though portrayed as the noblest and just senator, behaves like a bloodthirsty monster when he invites his fellow conspirators to bathe their hands in Caesar's blood. This action may have been introduced to cater to the taste of the groundlings who liked to watch the scenes of violence, bloodshed, and murders on the stage. Perhaps Brutus does not see Caesar's assassination as a murder. He considers it only as an act of sacrifice and himself a great freedom fighter. So far, there has been a contrast between Brutus and Cassius, but with the arrival of Antony on the scene, the contrast is between Brutus and Antony. From the moment Antony comes, he proceeds with skill and caution and successfully hoodwinks the conspirators. He is undoubtedly a good actor who conceals his real self successfully. Unlike the Caesar in history, Shakespeare has presented Caesar as a rude and proud leader, having little regard for his fellow senators. Perhaps he has portrayed Caesar in this light due to dramatic needs. Shakespeare intentionally portrayed down Caesar's role so that his murder should seem justified. This scene highlights one more aspect of Brutus's character. He is patriotic, but he is not fit for the role of a politician. Despite the warnings of Cassius, he allows Antony to speak at the time of Caesar's funeral, which turns out to be the greatest blunder of Brutus. এবার ক্যারেক্টার্স জুলিয়াস যাই হোক পরে ক্রিটিক্যাল অ্যাপ্রিসিয়েশনটাই যাই সিন টু অ্যাক্ট থ্রি সিন টু এর ক্রিটিক্যাল অ্যাপ্রিসিয়েশন. The scene has great dramatic importance for the whole play. It shows the seeds of further action after the death of the protagonist, after the death of Caesar, the protagonist. It makes Caesar dead more significant for this play. Living Caesar has become dead Caesar becomes more significant than living Caesar. After the murder has been committed, it brings a temporary pause in the movement of the plot. But the scene that follows initiates further action in the form of the consequences and the happenings that follow Caesar's murder by the conspirators, including his beloved friend Brutus. This brings out the dramatic value of the scene in a very powerful way. এবার বলছে the two powerful speeches recorded in this scene makes it highly artistic, thematically rich, the theat and theatrical in spirit. The two speakers, Brutus and Antony, show the way oratorial skill play a decisive role in human and public life. The shrewd and cunning ones make use of this element to hide their crimes by giving a pleasant and appealing color to them. These are the methods that politicians often use to sway the public mind. In this scene, Brutus makes use of the device first. He deploys his powerful weapon to justify Caesar's murder that he, along with his friends, commit. In this speech, Brutus uses this power in an effective way and wins the support of the people. His use of rhetorical devices, including direct questions like who are here so vile that will not love his country, who is here they here so base that would be a Roman, also implies an answer to this question, and the answer suits his design. The second speech of a familiar nature is given by Antony. Here again, the speaker succeeds in overpowering the public mind through his art of offering arguments. Interestingly, the irony involved in the use of this element functions in a dramatic and powerfully destructive way for Brutus. He is defended by his own weapon by Antony, who turns the masses against Brutus using the power and skill of oratory. As a consequence of these two speeches, the action of the play gets reinitiated. The melancholic effect of this scene can be realized in the depiction of bloodshed and murder on the stage, in a typical trait of Shakespearean drama that he does not hesitate presenting such scenes on the stage. 3, Scene 3. In this scene, Sinna the poet talks about the dream in which he was feasting with Caesar. This dream brings fear in his mind, and he treats it as something ominous. In Shakespearean drama, dreams play a vital dramatic role and often form an indication or foreboding for something evil and dangerous. This scene in Julius Caesar also relates the coming incidents in an effective way. Caesar's having feast with dead Caesar becomes a sign of joining the dead, meeting death. At yet another level, it develops a parallel between Cinna's dream and the dream Calpurnia has that implies her to ask Caesar not to go out of the house that day. Cinna comes out of his house unwillingly and gets killed in Act 3, Scene 3. Uh, this has much similarity with Caesar's fate, who experiences almost the same fate as the conspirators, like the citizens appear to be too rash to see reason and find an excuse to commit the murder. The scene acquires dramatic significance in bringing out the violent atmosphere prevailing after Caesar's death. It also shows the way Antony's speech has incited the citizens who were blind to reason and were bloodthirsty for the conspirators. The uncalled for behavior of the unruly mob highlights significant political perspective also. It indicates that the mobs, like the one that appears in this scene, deserves despotic rather than republican rule. তো এটা বলছে কি করছে, the mobs like the one that appears in this scene deserves despotic rule rather than a republican one. These citizens, by indulging in reckless, rash and violent behavior, reveal their own savageness. These people, Shakespeare perhaps wants to convey, did not deserve a kind, sympathetic, and republican ruler. It also suggests the unruly state of affairs in the Roman kingdom that marks the destruction of the very idea of democratic setup or the development of a republic for which Caesar is killed by Brutus. এবার অ্যাক্ট ফোর সিন ওয়ান critical appreciation. The scene about the new triumvirate carries immense significance in revealing some aspects of Antony's character. In this scene, Antony appears highly selfish, ambitious, unscrupulous, and undependable companion. The scene makes clear the complex and violent situation prevailing in Rome. There is a civil war between the forces of Antony and Brutus for the control of the kingdom. These two sides are controlled by two groups, one headed by Brutus and Cassius, and the other is headed by Antony, Octavius, and Lepidus. The scene also reveals that Antony is not prompted by his loyalty to Caesar to kill Brutus and other conspirators. It is his ambition for power that encourages him to kill the conspirators and gain power. The scene brings out the dark side of Antony's character in a prominent way. It also shows that among the members of the new triumvirate, Antony is likely to become more powerful than others. Lepidus and Octavius operate as his subordinates. Lepidus in this scene is shown as a great warrior, but he does not have any support from others. The scene presents a complex relationship between Lepidus and Antony, but Octavius too lacks the power and experience required for a good leader. In this situation, Antony appears to be a natural leader of the triumvirate that rules at present. This scene thus forms a foreshadowing of Antony's position in the subsequent parts of the play. This scene, in a way, establishes that for all intents and purposes, Antony's decisions are going to be valued by the triumvirate. Act 4, Scene 2. The scene is set in Brutus's camp near Sardis. This scene set in a camp indicates the inevitable happening of the war between the two opposite groups. There are preparations of war suggesting through the setting of the scene. Interestingly, this setting provides suitable circumstances for the scene that to appear immediately after this one. In fact, this scene functions as a natural prefix to the next scene, as the conversation that was supposed to take place between Brutus and Cassius in this scene is depicted in the next one. যেই কথাটা তোলা হলো, যে অ্যাক্ট ফোর সিন টু বললাম না, ঠিক বোঝা যাচ্ছে নাকি সেইটা নিয়ে হ্যাঁ, সেইটা নিয়ে পরের সিনে যাবে, সেটা নিয়ে কথা হলো এই সিনে, অ্যাক্ট 4 সিন 2 তে। The setting of the scene also marks a shift in the spatial location. All the earlier happenings took place in Rome, but this scene represents the incidents that take place in Sardis, Asia Minor. It indicates the rebel status of Brutus and Cassius. They are in command of the soldiers recruited not necessarily for Rome. They can be from this new place also. The conflict depicted in this scene appears to be more of a personal nature than political. Brutus's complaint and Cassius's reaction and his behavior correspond more with the behavior of two intimate friends in conflict to resolve some misgiving than the behavior of the two generals of some army quarreling over some strategic issues. Next, Act 4, Scene 3. The minor conflict between Brutus and Cassius, dramatized in this scene, points out that the two leaders are not natural allies. Their mutual trust rests on a very shaky ground. Cassius gets enraged over the accusations of Brutus for his taking bribes. These two leaders do not share a common nature, nor do they believe in using the same kind of means to achieve their goals in life. The scene suits the requirements of drama that necessarily requires conflict and tension between the two opposing sides. In this case, Brutus and Cassius stand for two attitudes towards life having contrasting approaches. It generates tension and conflict that enhances the appeal of the play and maintains the interest of the audience. At the same time, it gives further movement to the plot when the two leaders resolve their differences and decide to advance against their common enemies. From this point of view, the scene contributes much to the dramatic action that has to take place in the following parts of the play. Brutus's idealistic tendencies that form an important aspect of the tragic flaw in his character also get revealed in this part of the play. He is not ready to accept immoral and corrupt practices that his companion and supporter Cassius indulges in. Brutus does not act wisely and creates a situation that endangers their friendship from the common cause. And the appearance of Caesar's ghost in the scene adds the element of fear and horror to the already charged atmosphere of the play. It also adds a psychological dimension to the play, as the ghost can be related to Brutus's sense of guilt that disturbs him for killing Caesar in a conspiracy. Act 5, Scene 1. Cassius and Brutus have reached the plains of Philippi with the army. Octavius and Antony are already waiting for them along with their forces. Scene 1 of Act 5 takes place in Philippi, where two armies have marched to take on each other. This scene prepares the audience to the sights of bloodshed, tension, and the height of conflict in physical terms. The scene is also important to understand the way the friendship and interdependence between Cassius and Brutus have has grown. It can also be considered a vantage point that marks a sudden change in the fortunes of the important characters. After this scene, the play gradually moves towards the final stage and foreshadows a horrible ending full of violence. Cassius talking about eagles and ill omens in this scene also reveals his growing despondency and lack of confidence. Ironically, both Cassius and Brutus appear certain about their defeat. They do not utter even a single word expressing their desire to win or the plans to gain victory. They seem to have entered the battlefield just to end the war without hoping for victory. The exchange of the words of accusation and the mention of earlier acts functions as a reminder to the audience of the ghastly killing of Caesar. In a way, the scene arouses the sympathies of the audience for Caesar's friends. However, it also reiterates, reiterates the mistake committed by Brutus in not killing Antony, who now threatens the very existence of Brutus, his friends and supporters. Act 5, Scene 2. Critical appreciation. This is a very small but very significant scene. This scene reveals Brutus's haste in making judgment about the enemy forces. He declares the war and believes that Octavius is weak as a fighter. At this stage, the impressions is generated that there is a chance for Brutus's victory. This scene serves as this one is Act 5, Scene 2. Huh? This is a very small but very significant scene. This scene reveals Brutus as haste in making judgment about the enemy forces. He declares the war and believes that Octavius is weak as fighter. At this stage, the impression is generated that there is a chance for Brutus's victory. This scene serves as a useful dramatic purpose in rousing the expectations of the audience. Like other Shakespearean tragedies, the situational uncertainty gets highlighted here with the implication indications that there are chances of Brutus winning the war. Next, Act 5, Scene 4. At this stage, the play seems to be moving to a close, with apprehensions that Brutus and his forces will be completely destroyed. Like a few earlier scenes, this scene also shows a violent death. This time it is Cato who claimed to be brave and had raised a war cry that meets his end. Lucilius is taken as prisoner, and Brutus's escape reveals that he is running for his own life and is perhaps left helpless and alone. The way Antony orders to get Brutus dead or alive shows Brutus's lack of glory and power. Instead of a warrior and a powerful adversary of Antony, Brutus is now reduced to the status of someone running here and there for shelter. This scene very well indicates that Brutus's fate has been sealed and the ideals he proclaimed to be fighting for remain a far cry and stand destroyed. The scene shows Lucilius impersonating as Brutus to save him from. The scene shows Lucilius impersonating as Brutus. এটা খুব ইম্পর্ট্যান্ট একটা কথা দ্য সিন শোজ লুসিলিয়াস ইম্পারসোনেটিং as Brutus to save him from the enemy soldiers. The soldiers mistake him for Brutus and it helps Brutus in making good his escape. This loyalty and sacrifice for Brutus raises him even in the eyes of his enemy Antony. Thematically, the scene signifies Brutus's failure to establish republicanism and end tyranny. Through Brutus's defeat and impending death, the rise of triumvirate to power is signaled. It further points out the establishment of a more ruthless, violent, and power hungry triumvirate. Next, Act 5, Scene 5. On the other side of the battlefield, Brutus is seen with the companions Dardanius, Clytus, Strato, and Volumnius. These are the people left with Brutus after the death of Cassius, Titanius, and Cato. Brutus calls them poor remains of friends. Brutus is so desperate that he asks Clytus and then Dardanius to kill him. Both of them refuse. Brutus then confides to Volumnius that Caesar's ghost appeared to him earlier in Sardis and now in Philippi. It has made him believe that the time of his death has approached. Brutus reminds Volumnius that they had been friends since their school days. He asks Volumnius that in the name of their old friendship, Volumnius would hold his sword and let Brutus run upon it. Volumnius does not agree. এবার দ্য লাস্ট সিন এটা হচ্ছে অ্যাক্ট 5 সিন 5 তাই লাস্ট সিন অফ দ্য প্লে again includes a violent incident in the form of Brutus's suicide. His death also depicts the defeat of an individual as well as the idea of republicanism. এটা কি Brutus's death depicts the defeat of an individual as well as the idea of republicanism and a defeat of republicanism. The play seems to offer the view that the criminals and conspirators are ultimately punished and made to suffer. It also reveals if Caesar had a flaw in his character that made him arrogant and overconfident, resulting in his tragedy. Brutus also suffers from a sense of being paused with an idea of republicanism that brings his fall. Excessive pride, arrogance, overconfidence always cause suffering at the end. Brutus committing suicide no doubt forms the culmination of his earlier attempts to kill himself, but it is completely different and unacceptable when seen in relation to his earlier behavior in the first part of the play till Caesar's murder. The same was the case with Cassius, who too dies as a changed person. Instead of being aggressive and violent, Brutus and Cassius appear defeated and fatigued, perhaps from their own sense of guilt. তাহলে বলে কি বললো ব্রুটাস কমিটিং সুইসাইড no doubt forms the culmination of this earlier attempts to kill himself, but it is completely different and unacceptable when seen in relation to his earlier behavior in the first part of the play till Caesar's murder. বোঝা যাচ্ছে না মানে the same was the cause with Cassius, who too dies as a changed person. Brutus যে commit করলো suicide forms the culmination of his earlier attempts to kill himself. Right? কি লিখে গেছে? The scene resembles the one in which Cassius commits suicide. এই সিন অ্যাক্ট 5 সিন 5টা সেই সিনের সাথে মিল আছে যেটায় কেশিয়াস কমেট সুইসাইড। ওটা কোন সিন ছিল? অ্যাক্ট 5 সিন 3 তে কেশিয়াস ডাইস, অ্যাক্ট 5 সিন 5 এ ব্রুটাস ডাইস। অ্যাক্ট 5 সিন 3 তে কেশিয়াস কমেট সুইসাইড। এই যে কেশিয়াস গেট পিন্ডেরাস obeys the orders and Cassius gets killed. Act 5 scene 3. In Act 5 scene 5, Brutus commits suicide. This scene resembles the one in which Cassius commits suicide in Act 5 scene 3. Cassius committed suicide in Act 5 scene 5. Brutus died. While in Act 5 scene 3, Cassius died. In Act 5 scene 5, Brutus died. Like the earlier scene depicting Cassius's death, here too we see the retreating soldiers and news causing the worsening of situation. The theme and the incident of death, suicide, the discovery of the dead body, and the tributes paid to the dead. Antony and Octavius eulogizing eulogizing Brutus redeem the dead man in the eyes of the audience to a large extent. This kind of presentation saves this play from becoming an ordinary story of crime and punishment.